Picture a pond in the dead of winter. The surface freezes over solid, thick enough to stand on. And locked inside that ice, not moving, is an alligator. Snout pushed up through a hole no bigger than your fist. Heart beating a few times a minute. Alive. It's been sitting like that for days. And when the thaw comes, it slides back down into the water like nothing happened. That's the animal we need to talk about. Because it just turned up somewhere it is not supposed to exist, and the thing that was meant to stop it isn't working anymore. Spring 2026. Virginia. A state biologist walks into the Great Dismal Swamp and finds an American alligator living in the wild, in a state where wild alligators are not supposed to be. Officers watched it with their own eyes before it slid into the black water and vanished. Now, there's an easy answer here, and I'll give it to you straight, because it's true most of the time. But that easy answer is also the exact reason nobody has noticed what's really happening. A slow, quiet thing, moving north across the map. Hidden in plain sight, because here's what the same biologist said next. The part nobody repeated. He said natural migration could not be ruled out, that they'd been watching alligators push their range north for years. So, by the end of this, you're going to understand three things. Why the cold used to kill these animals, why it doesn't anymore, and why the real edge of where they live is almost certainly further north than anyone can prove. Stick with me, because the frozen alligator I opened with, that's the key to the whole thing. For all of history, alligators had one hard limit: winter. They're cold-blooded. Too many freezing days in a row, and the animal dies. Simple as that. That one fact drew a line across the American Southeast, an invisible wall the alligator could never cross. And the wall held for decades. Here's how close they got to it. The northernmost wild-breeding population of alligators on the East Coast sits at a place called Merchant's Mill Pond in North Carolina. How far is that from the Virginia border? 8 miles? 8. For decades, those animals lived jammed right up against the edge of what their bodies could survive, pressed against the cold like water against a dam. And the cold held them there. But here's the thing about that wall. It was never really a border on a map. It was a temperature. And a temperature can move. Over the last 50 years, winters have been getting warmer. Research and scientific reports found that winter temperatures in parts of Virginia, North Carolina, and Tennessee climbed about 1.5 degrees Celsius in half a century. That sounds tiny. It isn't. Because every fraction of a degree those coldest nights climb, the wall creeps north, and the animals pressed against it are free to follow it into ground that used to kill them. And they're not asking permission. Watch this number. Between 2018 and 2022, 4 years, wildlife agencies across these northern territories saw a 215% jump in alligator removal calls. More than triple in 4 years. And it got big enough that states which had never in their entire history needed a plan for alligators, Tennessee, Virginia, started writing alligator management protocols from scratch. Think about that. You don't build a whole system for one stray pet. You build it for something that's arriving and not leaving. This is where one weird gator in a swamp becomes something moving across a map. Tennessee's own wildlife agency stopped calling these sightings flukes. They now say it flat out in writing. Alligators are naturally expanding into Tennessee from the states to the south. And they've got the footage to prove it. Not a hatchling somebody smuggled home in a shoebox. A 7-foot wild adult filmed by the agency itself in a West Tennessee wildlife area. Then it keeps going. Alligators in the mountains of East Tennessee, in the rivers of Arkansas, in the creeks and farm ditches of the mid-Atlantic. Same story every single time. An animal showing up hundreds of miles north of where the map says it can be, in water that a generation ago would have frozen it dead. So how is that possible? How is the cold not killing them? I told you at the start I'd show you. Here it is. When the water starts to freeze, an alligator does something almost no animal can do. It swims to the surface, pushes just its snout up through the water, and opens its nostrils to the air, right as the ice forms around it. And then it holds. Perfectly still, snout breaking the surface, ice locking solid around its entire body. Its heart slows to a few beats a minute. It drops into a frozen sleep called brumation. That's the fancy word. But all it means is the animal shuts down and waits, days like that, locked in the ice, breathing through one small hole, till the thaw comes and it slides back down, alive. That's the animal we're talking about. One that can be frozen into a pond and live. So the cold was never a perfect wall. It was only ever a hard one. And as the winters go soft, an animal that was already built to survive them is finding the other side more livable every single year. Now, I have to be straight with you, because there's a real objection here and it deserves a real answer. A lot of these northern alligators genuinely are escaped or dumped pets. Virginia's records are full of them. A 4-foot gator killed in Chesapeake, a 3-footer in a reservoir, pet alligators loose in creeks and hotel parking lots. Somebody buys a cute baby gator. It gets big and terrifying. They panic and dump it. When a little alligator shows up in a suburban pond, that's usually the real answer. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but watch what happens when you actually think it through. Because conceding that doesn't kill the mystery. It sharpens it. A dumped pet explains one animal. It does not explain a 215% surge across multiple states in 4 years. It doesn't explain a state agency putting natural range expansion in writing. It doesn't explain a 7-foot wild adult on film, or a breeding population sitting 8 miles from Virginia, or 1.5 degrees of measured winter warming rolling the line north. So, here's the twist. Those released pets? They're not the explanation. They're the camouflage. Every dumped gator that turns up in a northern pond makes the next one easier to wave off. And somewhere inside all that noise, a real range expansion is creeping north under cover of the easy answer, one warm winter at a time. And here's what should really get you. We almost certainly can't see how far north they already are. An alligator is built to disappear. It lies dead still for hours, underwater, just its eyes above the surface, in swamps and blackwater rivers and ditches nobody is surveying, because officially there's nothing there to survey for. It leaves no tracks. It can go weeks without moving after a meal. Now look at where this one turned up. The Great Dismal Swamp. 1,000 square miles of water so dark and so thick that people once hid in it for entire lifetimes, cut through the middle by a channel called Washington Ditch. Dug in the 1700s on the orders of George Washington himself, who owned a piece of this swamp and wanted to drain it into farmland. The swamp won. It swallowed the whole effort and kept its water. 300 years later, it's still keeping secrets. So, put it together. An animal built to vanish underwater, in a landscape built to hide things, in a region where nobody's looking because everybody knows there are no alligators there. For every gator, some startled hiker sees slide off a log. How many are lying still in water no one is watching? That alligator in the Great Dismal Swamp slipped into the black water and was gone before the officers could do more than confirm it was real. The state isn't hunting it. Like the biologist said, they live in the wild, and that's what we want. So, it's still out there. Somewhere in George Washington's drowned dream of farmland. Either a lost pet that wandered too far north, or the leading edge of an animal quietly taking back a range the cold once stole from it, following the retreating freeze into country that used to be its own. The winters keep getting warmer. The line keeps moving north. And an animal that can lie frozen in a pond and wake up alive is in no hurry at all. It's been waiting since before the dinosaurs died. It can wait through a few more winters. Until one spring, the alligator in a swamp where alligators don't live isn't a mystery anymore. It's a resident, and no one will be able to say exactly when the impossible thing became the normal one.